This videotape will show you how to perform filing and polishing operations on the engine lathe. Filing is a finishing operation used primarily for removing tool marks and reducing the diameter of a workpiece slightly. No more than 2 to 5 thousandths of an inch should be removed from a workpiece diameter when filing. Polishing is usually performed to improve the surface finish and appearance of the workpiece after you have machined it on the lathe. This operation will usually remove 2 to 5 ten-thousandths of an inch from the work diameter. After viewing this videotape, you should be able to write down the safety procedures for filing and polishing on the lathe, write down the steps for filing on the engine lathe, and write down the steps for polishing on the engine lathe. When you are filing and polishing, you must take certain safety precautions to protect yourself and the people around you. Always wear your safety glasses. Remove all watches, rings, and jewelry. Roll your sleeves up above the elbow. Never use a file without a handle. And remove any threads hanging on the end of the polishing paper. They can wrap around the workpiece. You must also take precautions to protect the lathe. For polishing, cover the ways with a rag to catch the abrasive particles. Secure the rags to keep them away from the revolving workpiece. The rags will keep the abrasives off the ways and prevent wear. Use nothing but a clean rag to clean your machine after filing and polishing. Never use air to blow out grit, because it will be blown under moving parts and cause wear. Filing operations are performed to remove burrs and sharp corners, and to remove surface tool marks. Removing these tool marks will slightly reduce the diameter of the work. This reduction can be controlled to give you a precise measurement on the work. Polishing operations are usually performed to improve the surface appearance of the part. It removes a much smaller amount of material from the diameter than filing. This reduction in diameter can also be controlled for operations such as fitting mating parts. Since filing is usually performed after a machining operation, this demonstration will begin with the work having been finished cut to within 2 thousandths to 5 thousandths of an inch of its specified diameter of 1 inch. This particular piece has 3 thousandths of an inch left for filing and polishing. The filing operation will reduce the diameter to within 2 to 5 ten-thousandths of an inch to allow for polishing. Step 1 in filing is to set the spindle RPM to a filing speed. You generally set the speed for ferrous metals at 4 or 5 times the roughing speed. For non-ferrous metals, your setting should be 2 or 3 times the roughing speed. Too fast a speed will cause the file to slide over the work, glazing the surface and dulling your file. Too slow a speed may result in an out-of-round workpiece. The workpiece you see here is a machine steel or ferrous metal and about 1 inch in diameter. Its roughing RPM is 4 times its cutting speed of 80 surface feet per minute divided by 1 inch, and that equals 320 RPMs. 4 times that number gives you your filing RPM, 1280 RPMs. Set the RPM. For this high RPM, you should use a ball bearing center in the tailstock to keep from burning the center and ruining the work. Disengage the feed rod and lead screw. For filing and polishing, remove the tool post and tool from the compound rest. These precautions ensure that the operator can move freely during filing without bumping the parts of the machine. The next step in filing is to select a file. Mill files are best for filing on the lathe. They vary in length, usually running 8, 10, or 12 inches. The larger the length and diameter of the work, the larger the file you need. For this operation, the best file is a 10-inch single-cut mill file. Never use a file that is not fitted with a handle over the pointed tang. The next step is to file the work. Start the spindle and position the file over the work with its point slightly angled toward the tailstock. Hold the file with your left hand on the handle and your right hand on the point. This technique is called left-hand filing and is meant to keep the file and your hands and arms away from the lathe dog or chuck. Start filing by placing the file on the work at the headstock end and applying a light pressure. As you apply pressure, move the file away from you. Then move the file back toward you. Relax the pressure on the return stroke. Use long, slow strokes to keep from filing the piece out of round. This technique also ensures that the work will make a number of turns under the file during each stroke. Remove the file occasionally and clean the file with a file card. If you are having problems with chips sticking to the file, you can apply chalk to the file to keep the chips from sticking. Continue to file the work, moving along the length of the piece from headstock to tailstock, filing its entire length. Don't file one end and then the other, or you will taper your work. Disengage the clutch and check the work for diameter and taper, using a 10,000th micrometer for measuring. Continue the filing operation until you are within 2 to 5 10,000ths of an inch of the diameter. As you can see, this workpiece is 3 10,000ths of an inch over the specified finished diameter of 1 inch with no taper. You are now ready to polish the piece to its finished diameter. If the machine finish of your workpiece is smooth enough, you may go directly to the polishing operation without filing. The diameter must be within 2 to 5 10,000ths of an inch, whether you are polishing after machining or after filing. Otherwise, you will take too long to reduce the piece to specifications. The first step in polishing is to select your spindle RPM. Calculate this setting using a surface foot speed of 5,000 surface feet per minute. So 4 times 5,000 divided by the diameter equals the RPM you want. On this 1-inch diameter piece, as on small diameters, generally the calculated RPM will be greater than the machine's capacity. In those cases, you set the machine to its highest RPM. Disengage the feed rod and the lead screw. Cover the machined ways with a clean rag. The second step in polishing is to select a starting grit, depending on the smoothness of the work. You will probably not need a grit coarser than 120 for starting. Since this workpiece has already been filed, let's start with 240. Then use 320, 400, and 600 to finish. You have to use the grits in order, working from lower to higher numbers, because each grit removes the scratches left by the previous grit. Start with a 1 or 1.5 inch width of abrasive cloth, 4 to 6 inches long. The next step in polishing is to engage the clutch and position the cloth on the work in this fashion. Keep the cloth flat on the work and move it back and forth by pulling on each end of it. Move the cloth clear out to the end of the work in each direction. Don't stop to polish one spot or you'll taper the piece. Do not polish too long with one grit. Stop the spindle occasionally. And check the diameter of the work. Then select the next finer grit and repeat the polishing procedure. Continue polishing with frequent stops to check the diameter until you have finished with the 600 grit and have the finish and diameter you want. For polishing work of small diameters, you may want to use a collet chuck. In this way, you get rid of the chatter caused by the unbalanced weight of the lathe dog. Here you see a small diameter piece being polished in a collet chuck. To review the important points of filing and polishing, you should now be able to take safety precautions to protect you, the people around you, and your lathe while filing and polishing. Write down these steps in a filing operation. Calculate a filing RPM. Select a file. And file the piece to within 2 to 5/10,000ths of the diameter you want. Write down these steps in a polishing operation. Calculate a polishing RPM. Select the proper grit of polishing cloth and polish the piece to a specified diameter.